Alright, project on this lane is going to be swapping out worn cross conveyor belts. They're starting to have some issues with pins slipping on the belts. So the first thing we need to do, we're going to loosen up these two bolts for the bottom of the pulley housing. Most of the time this will just slide over, but these J-bolts are cranked down pretty tight, so we're going to have to just loosen those up a tiny bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. Alright, I need two hands for this. All we're going to do is we're just going to swing that forward so we can get the belts off. But I need two hands. I figured out what we were hanging up on. They've got a homemade belt guard on here that was making contact with the pulley assembly. So that's why I needed two hands. So I know most people that are watching these videos probably know how to change out a cross conveyor belt. If you do, that's fine. Not everybody does, which is why we're making this video. So we've got our pulley slid all the way forward. The belt's going to come off of the rear pulley, each side. This one's a little tricky because they've got some homemade belt guards in here. Not a big deal. So the belts are off the bottom pulley. We're going to reposition. We're going to go up top because these guys have some older machines and a little bit different on the belt change with this. With this vintage of machine, the cross conveyor micro switch is going to have to come out because the cable's routed in a way that it's going to interfere with the belt change. So the easiest thing to do is just take the micro switch off. So we should need a 5/16 nut driver. We want to be careful not to lose the nuts and the screws because I'm not sure if they have more. Alright, so that's out. Let that just kind of dangle right there. Those screws are okay there. Let me see if I can swing you guys up. I'm going to take the belt off of the front pulley. It may or may not fit between the wire channel and the cross conveyor frame easily. That one was pretty good. I'm just going to drop that belt into the pit. We'll retrieve it later. Take off our, this would be the 7 side. That comes off a lot easier. Just drop that into the pit. Bring in 2 new belts. Got one. Make sure you face the right direction. These are not standard V-belts. These are cogged and shaped. So orientation matters. Let's see. The new belt came out, or the old belt came out pretty easy. I'm wondering if the new belt is going to be struggling to get in, or it's just going to go easy. Bring in a little pry bar leverage action here. The new belt's a little thicker. A little more difficult to get through there. Let go of the pry bar. My 3/4 inch wrench pry bar. Alright. Belts. Almost there. Alright. So we're on the front pulleys. Good. Let's bring our micro switch back in. Making sure not to lose any of the hardware. Easier said than done, always. Why is that not going in? Alright. Switch is back in place. Get our screws back on. And then when we're done with that, oh, I dropped it. Boy, that was a close one. I found it. It landed on the top of the moving deck, so I got really lucky. Boy, oh boy. Get a little more light. Get multiple balls per bucket. Tight, but not too tight. These are not very large diameter screws. It's easy to snap those. Alright, this looks good. Let's go back down around the bottom. Alright, we've jumped around back to the bottom of the machine. Just going to bring in 7-side belt. We're going to go in between the turn pan and the cross conveyor frame. On, we're going to do the exact same thing with the 10-pin side. Tricky part sometimes on these is getting them under your turn pan mounts. This one is going to cooperate very nicely. Bring our round drive belt back in. It's on the pulleys, it's on the belt tensioner. We're good to go there. And pull our slack out. We don't want these belts to be super tight. That's not the goal. The goal is to make sure the belts aren't slipping on the pulley grooves and that they're not rubbing on any of the wiring on the cross member up there. They make a fancy tool for tensioning these belts. I don't usually need anything fancy. Usually just a 3/4 wrench or something like that. Ooh, slipped a little. There we go. So I'm holding tension, and then I'm gonna tighten down the lower bolts. There's one. Can let go now. Second one is getting there. All right. And then we're gonna tighten our J-bolts back down a little bit. It's possible to over tighten these J-bolts too and deform them. And then you'll have issues with these things. You'll crank these J-bolts down and they still won't tighten onto the frame. And you'll never be able to hold like a left to right adjustment on that bottom cross conveyor. So, yeah, this looks good. We're gonna button everything else back up. We're gonna take our stick-up lights out. We're gonna turn it on and we're just gonna verify. Looks like the pins are feeding pretty good. A lot better than they were. That screechy noise, that's a bad short turret drive belt. We'll address that in a separate issue, different video. We're just here to look at cross conveyor drive belts, or cross conveyor belts for now. We're all done.